the rough. From the inside, our boy Bodie. Dancing Buck is right there, and a yes and yes on the outside. Then it's Kawaii River, who's racing in a fourth. Power Agenda moves up a spot from fifth. High Front is on the extreme outside in sixth. The break of four, back to Supply and Demand. And it's another 4 lengths back to Jewelstone, who trails the field in eighth. Big long shot, our boy Bodie opens up a 3.5 length lead over Yes and Yes. The quarter, 21 2/5 seconds. They race midway around the turn. Our boy Bodie, Yes and Yes giving chase in second. Power Agenda is third. Dancing Buck down at the rail. And on the outside is a High Front. And then comes Kawaii River and Supply and Demand. They are at the head of the stretch. It is our boy Bodie, Yes and Yes. And now High Front kicks in on the extreme outside. Yes and Yes and High Front. And Kawaii River making a move from the back of the pack. It is Yes and Yes and High Front. Then Kawaii River, followed by Dancing Buck. Supply and Demand coming on late. They come for the finish, and it is Yes and Yes. Yes. Ten, 6, and 7. Time of the race was 1 minute 8 and 1/5 seconds. Number 8, Yes and Yes. A 6-year-old bay gelding by SIDNEY'S Candy. Out of Aberdeen Alley by Distorted Humor. Yes and Yes, owned by Glebe, Strauss, and Fitzsimmons. Trained by Dave Donk. The rider, Jorge Vargas Jr. Yes and